Journey Longer, Chapter 2. The doors to the city were regal in design, in a shape and style Icarus had never seen before. A clear name was etched into the entrance overhead, but in a language unrecognizable. It hurt a little to stare at the characters, and aggravated him to think about it. Upon entering the land, Icarus' eyes darted from side to side, trying to look for obvious signs. This was not Icarus' first town. He had come to learn certain signs. Loose chickens on the city floor guaranteed a certain level of prosperity. Women walking together without children meant a certain level of safety. This town had one overwhelming and obvious sign Icarus couldn't quite understand. The amount of people sleeping on the dirt road, lying against the walls or steps, was more than unusual. The plague, Icarus thought to himself. Children sleeping sprawled out on the dirt, motionless except for their breath raising and lowering their chest. While trying to understand what he was seeing, a 3-man envoy approached him. The men looked like knights, armed from the neck down in silver armor, with matching sigils of a dove. Icarus spoke preemptively. "Is there a problem, sir?" The largest man spoke slowly, stuttering with a long drawl. "You new here?" the knight said. "Just arrived. You have to come with me." "With you? Why?" "We'll explain on the way." "And if I refuse?" The 2 men in the rear drew their swords, noticeably lethargic, one of them taking 2 attempts to clear the sword from its casing. "I'm afraid we must insist." "Let me leave. I'll grab some supplies and leave tonight. You either walk out that gate now, or you meet with the Grand Mage." Icarus knew he was running out of supplies: meat, wraps, and most importantly, long-wicked candles. He had heard of a Grand Mage, but never met one. "This way," the knight gestured. Icarus followed. The sleepy people seemed to be all over the city, extending all the way up to the royal castle. Towns with local magi were interesting. Magic seemed as prevalent as iron, in the signs, in the architecture. After 4 natural towns, Icarus had forgotten what a spectacle a floating sign can be. Of glowing stones lining the tavern cobblestone path, floating lanterns in the streets above, the height of a man even on horseback. The smell of roses filled the castle upon arrival. 2 men escorted Icarus to the throne room. What it lacked in gaudy appearance, it made up in sheer size. Large murals painted on every surface as if uninterrupted by the furniture, as if the furniture in the room was painted with the walls. In front of where Icarus was brought stood an atypical throne. 4 chairs stood side by side, equal in size and engraved jewels. "You will be addressing the Royal Third, who is currently also the Grand Mage of Idrisil. You will address him as Royal Third, understood?" Icarus nodded his head, feeling the tension rise around him. All 3 knights bowed to the empty throne. Icarus followed suit. "Your Royal Third, we have the traveler you saw. He was also the only one today." "Well, let's see what he has to say," a booming voice responded. Silence filled the room, Icarus' eyes darting around, lost in both etiquette and understanding. "Answer him," the knight said. "Can he see us?" Icarus asked the knight. "Yes, and hear you." "What is that on you? It's very old. A rune?" The knights drew their sword. No, a treasure. Payment for my assistance." "Payment?" the voice scoffed. Loose sand spread imperceptibly thin on the throne room began to wisp together, whirling in a man-sized spiral. A man emerged from that spiral, with completely white beard and head of hair. His face and hair cleanly cut, neck and wrists sporting expensive jewels and medals. "Put your weapons away. This man isn't dangerous." 2 of the 3 knights sheathed their swords. "I have a proposition for you," the mage said. "If you agree and succeed, I'll give you a fortune. And if I refuse, I'll kill you, here and now. Painless, instant. There is a man in our walls trying to achieve lichdom. I know you don't know magics, but are you familiar? it's synonymous with worse than death, and then you know enough. The process is long and supposedly impossible, but it's happening. And if it reaches its conclusion, this kingdom, every life will be lost. The words coming from such a credible source landed like tar on a bed of grass. Once the mage had said those words, dread crept on him. He knew he would never forget this warning. He wasn't sure if it was the certainty or the casualness that he said it. Icarus and the mage took the carriage through the town. The trip was slow. Icarus was still uncertain of his destination. You want me to kill him? Kill him immediately. As soon as you see him, the quicker the better. Icarus' mind races thinking of all the double meanings that could have been in what he said. He's all but certain that the mage wasn't being transparent. And if you kill him, I'll reward you. What kind of fortune? The kind of fortune you'd like. I'm a mage, not a genie. Consider it gratuity, not payment. Why not send soldiers? Why throw my life away? I have nothing to do with your kingdom. Just then, the carriage passes a schoolyard, empty except for a few children giving a practice wave as the cart rolled by. My name is Giovanni. I've been here since last spring. When I arrived, I was approached immediately, same as you. I was paid a small fortune to grant sleep to a man affected by amnesia. I wasn't told who or how this man had come under what I thought was a curse. With old magics and a little luck, I was able to grant him sleep, temporarily, but he was grateful. Before I could venture onward, the king himself had requested my audience. Of course I met. He told me if I could continue to help with amnesia, he'd make me his new grand mage. That's when I realized the man I'd helped before had been the previous grand mage, and that he was no longer around. The sheer number of people that were in need of sleep, highborns, butchers, clerics, maids, it seemed to have no correlation. By the time I realized it all came from a single area, word had got out. The king is gone, and this land is plagued. What I know is that it spreads from a single home, right in the heart of Unenbrunn. Those nearest are affected the worst, but nobody is immune. So the plan is simple. Ask the first new face in town if they'd like a fortune to kill who was ever in that house. Kill a mage, a grand mage. With what and how? Just then the cart stopped. The houses were built side by side, but the home in question was impossible to miss, almost as if a bad memory had kept him from going near. The mage handed Icarus a dagger. Icarus looked one last time at the mage, expecting advice. The mage's face looked as petrified as Icarus felt. He seemed to have a difficult time looking at the house. Icarus stepped out of the cart. There was what looked like a potato sack of gold coins just next to the door. The way Icarus saw it at that moment, he had two choices: flee on foot and re-enter the unknown. His hands were sweaty, he was hungry, with very little supplies to his name. Or open the door and see what it had to offer. Opening the door was easy enough, and inside was what was expected. A wood table, a kitchen that looked unused but not dirty, as if the home was abandoned weeks or months ago. A loaf of hard bread, long since turned to stone, and an old lantern with grease stains all over it sat on the table. Icarus couldn't turn his mind off, looking for danger, signs of a trap, magics. I'm here to kill one man. This is a 2-floor structure, and the stairs were steps away. As he walked up the stairs, his mind began to swell. Danger, fear, dread. How dangerous could this man be to bring a kingdom on the verge of doom? There weren't any bodies around. Did this mean that he was the first the mage sent in? A chill made Icarus clutch his arms. The steps creaked. If they collapsed, he would fall to his death. Icarus paused and took a deep breath. The air was colder than any day he could remember. He saw the breath leave in front of him. No one's coming in here after me, he thought. The mage lied to me. I fell for fool's gold. Those coins are most likely a fake ploy to feed men to whatever is in here. I wish he would just kill me now. He snapped out of it when he noticed the door on the top of the steps. The door must lead to that man. That's when Icarus noticed that he was only halfway up the stairs. Yet it felt like he had been walking for so long. His legs ached as if he had been walking miles. His ears felt like they had been hearing footsteps for a while. Yet when he looked back down, he was only 4 steps up the 12-step structure. When he reached the final step, his mind settled. He pressed his head against the door, listening, forgetting he should have made an effort to be silent. He couldn't hear anything. With a swallow, he unsheathed his knife. He grabbed the ring door handle and opened slowly. Inside, there stood a man. He stood in the opposite corner of the room, facing where the 2 walls met. His hair long and his clothes high class, but his body had a layer of dust like everything else in the house. Kill him fast, he thought. He had taken a step before he had let go of the door handle. When he actually let go, his hand stuck to it. The moisture in his palms had frozen to the metal handle. He turned his head in shock back to his hand and ripped his hand from the hook. It took a thin layer of skin with it. There was of course no time for that. Icarus turned his head back to the man. He was still standing motionless. Frozen in primal fear, Icarus pauses, dropping the knife from a glance. What Icarus seen out of the corner of his eye, while turning back to that man, would haunt him for the rest of his life. Its body was skeletal, with a thin layer of blue skin covering its hairless form. Its size was hard to understand. It had a man's form, in that it had 2 arms, 2 legs, and a head. But it laid on its side, and its massive head turned unnaturally right side up. Its body from head to toe took up more than half of the room, contorting just to fit. Icarus knew he was going to die. He knew now that it would be more gruesome than anything he could have deserved. Unable to move, he closed his eyes and waited for the moment of death. Now he could hear it breathing. It struggled for life. He opened his eyes, looking right at it. Piss ran down his leg. Its fixed eyes go from the man to the corner to Icarus, cracking every inch it moved. Icarus ran out of the room. He ran faster than he had ever before, the staircase a field's distance from the door. He thought to himself, it was only a step away before. What is this? He could hear its breathing now, just as clear in this room as if it was hovering behind him. The staircase was even longer. Icarus tried his best to steady his mind and focus on each step, only losing his footing twice. The closer he got to the bottom, the closer on his neck he felt the breath. When he reached the floor, he was so panicked that he couldn't feel the cold, couldn't find the strength to turn his head, only reaching out for the door handle. And when he opened it, the inside stairway going down greeted him on the other side. No, he thought, in a panic. Without breaking his stride, he started down the second set of stairs. Outside the house, a small crowd, including the mage, stood listening but not looking at the home. The booming steps, frantically sprinting and falling down the steps, could be heard from outside. Up and down, as if a wild animal had been let loose. Occasionally, a panicked squeal scream could be heard. That sound went on for hours. The villagers walked away, disappointed eventually. He couldn't do it. The realization hit them in different times. Eventually, nobody was waiting anymore, not even the mage. By the time Icarus had reached the floor level, he could feel the creature's teeth tightening around the back of his neck. He didn't stop. Trickles of blood could be felt gliding down his back. He didn't stop. For an instant he thought, maybe I should jump. He didn't stop. When he reached the doorway, he barged through it, landing on the porch outside, his eyes searching, relieved. The gold bag lying beside him. The door opened right behind him. He only found the courage to take 2 fistfuls of gold to line his pocket, and he started for the nearby tied-up horse. He only found the courage to take 2 fistfuls of gold to line his pockets before he started for a nearby tied-up horse. Icarus galloped down the sleepy town's cobblestone path. He didn't look back. He didn't slow down. Past the main entrance, he continued kicking deep into the horse's sides. It was nightfall. Icarus was still galloping. In the darkness, the horse tripped. Its body buckled and rolled to the ground, launching Icarus. His gold splashed out of his pockets. He tried his best to grab all the visible pieces in the dark, but there was grass. The horse stands and gallops back the way it came. Exhausted and out of ideas, hungry and without any supplies, he decided to sleep right there on the path. At daybreak, he can look again, he thought to himself. It took only a few moments for him to fall asleep. Icarus woke, feeling the freezing wind on his neck. He didn't remember where he was, but he expected the ground of a forest. It was the room. It was that room. With a slight turn, Icarus could see the silhouette of the man standing where he was in that corner. And next to him, contorted, arms wrapping along the walls encroaching on the man, was that thing. It turned to look at him. This time he met its gaze, its eyes hopeless, its conception unholy. It took him a few moments to move his legs again, and a few hours for him to reach the front door of the little house. The second time he emerged from the house, it was dusk, and the only thing he could think about was waking up back inside tomorrow. He didn't grab the money this time. I have to find a way out of this, he thought to himself. He jogged the cobblestone path this time, exhaustion like he's never felt before mounting on his body. He turned back to face the house. The entity now, the size of the house, this time awkwardly standing on the roof, eyes glowing purple and yellow. It stared at Icarus. It was morning by the time he reached the entrance again, where he collapsed out of exhaustion. It was morning by the time he reached the entrance again, where he collapsed out of exhaustion. Even in his sleep, the feeling of that creature standing behind him never subsided. He woke the next day, ready to run. He rolled over and hit a protruding root. That meant he was outside. He began his journey again with nothing. After miles of walking, with his legs and stomach hurt, he turned one last time to the kingdom. From the hillside, the town was a good distance away, and at a lower altitude. He could see the whole kingdom from up here. And that thing, now standing awkwardly at a mountain's height, staring at him.